The courtroom in downtown Chicago fell silent as Victoria Harrington slammed the motion to void the will on the polished mahogany table. Her voice cut through the air like a knife. "This is outrageous. Richard would never have left the controlling shares of Harrington Developments to Kinsey knowing she is married to a woman, and can never give us a true heir to carry on the family name and legacy." Kinsey Harrington sat frozen in her seat, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on her. Aaliyah Thompson, her wife of 3 years, squeezed her hand tightly, offering silent strength amid the chaos. The judge called for order, but the words had already planted seeds of doubt and division that would tear the family apart in ways none of them could have imagined. It had all begun 2 months earlier when Kinsey received the call that her father Richard had suffered a massive heart attack and didn't make it. The family gathered at the law offices of Ellis and Associates for the reading of the will. Kinsey had arrived with Aaliyah by her side despite knowing Victoria would disapprove. The lawyer, Mr. Ellis, had read the document in a steady voice. "To my beloved daughter Kinsey, I leave 60% of the shares in Harrington Developments with the condition that she continues to lead with integrity. To my wife Victoria 30% and the remaining to charity." The room had erupted then. Victoria had stood up, her face red with anger. "This cannot stand. Kinsey has chosen a lifestyle that prevents her from producing an heir. The family line ends with her. I demand the will be contested." Kinsey had felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had always known Victoria saw her as a threat to her own position, but this was a new level of cruelty. Her father had known about her relationship with Aaliyah. He had struggled with it at first, the conservative businessman from old Chicago stock, but eventually he had come to respect Aaliyah and even attended their small wedding in a private garden 3 years ago. But now Victoria was using that love against her. As the lawyer explained the legal process, Kinsey's mind wandered to the price she had already paid for her truth. Coming out at 22 had cost her some friends and strained her relationship with her father for years. But Aaliyah had been her rock. They met in college at Northwestern University during a student art show where Aaliyah was exhibiting her paintings. Kinsey was drawn to her vibrant energy and the way she saw the world with such compassion. Their friendship turned to love over late-night talks and shared dreams. When Kinsey told her father, he had said he wanted her happy but worried about the family business and public image. Victoria had been vocal in her disapproval from the beginning, calling it a phase that would ruin everything. Now with the will challenged, Kinsey knew the battle was just beginning. She turned to Aaliyah after the hearing. "I can't believe she is doing this. Dad wanted me to have it." Aaliyah nodded, her eyes filled with love and resolve. "We will fight this together. You are his daughter and you deserve this. Our love doesn't make you less capable." But inside, Kinsey wrestled with doubt. Was she really the right person to lead the empire if she couldn't provide a biological heir? The company had been built on generations of Harrington men passing it down. Society in their circles still whispered about traditional values. The next day, the legal team gathered at Kinsey's apartment in the Gold Coast. The lawyer laid out the strategy. Victoria was claiming undue influence, or that the will went against public policy, or a hidden clause in the family trust requiring heirs to be capable of continuing the line. It was a stretch, but with enough money, Victoria could drag it out for years. Kinsey knew the cost would be high emotionally and financially. As they discussed, Kinsey felt the pressure building. She had worked hard in the company, rising through ranks without special treatment. Her decisions had increased profits by 20% last year. But now all that was overshadowed by her personal life. That night as they lay in bed, Aaliyah whispered, "Whatever happens, I am with you. But you have to decide if this fight is worth the toll it will take on us." Kinsey nodded, but sleep didn't come easy. The internal conflict raged. She loved Aaliyah more than anything, but the guilt of potentially losing the family business that her father poured his life into weighed heavy. The next week brought the first confrontation. Victoria called a family meeting at the old mansion in Lake Forest. Kinsey and Aaliyah arrived to find Victoria and her cousin Sophia already there. Sophia had always been close to Victoria, more like a daughter to her. "Kinsey, this is ridiculous," Victoria started, her voice dripping with false concern. "You know your father wanted a grandson to carry the name. Your choice makes that impossible. Let me take the shares and ensure the legacy continues." Kinsey stood her ground. "Dad knew about us and he still left it to me. This is about your greed, not legacy." Sophia chimed in unexpectedly. "Maybe Victoria has a point. The business needs stability. Public perception matters." The betrayal stung. Sophia had been like a sister. Kinsey left the meeting with her heart heavy but determination stronger. The legal fight was on and she would not back down. Over the following days, Kinsey threw herself into work trying to prove her worth. Meetings with investors felt different now. Whispers followed her in the hallways. One board member even pulled her aside suggesting she consider options like surrogacy to quiet the noise. Kinsey refused, feeling it would betray everything she and Aaliyah stood for. Aaliyah faced her own battles at the art gallery where she worked curating exhibits. Colleagues who once praised her talent now avoided eye contact after the news leaked to local papers. Yet every evening Aaliyah came home with dinner ready, and words of encouragement that reminded Kinsey why their bond was unbreakable. The decision to fight wasn't just about money, it was about proving that love and capability weren't defined by outdated rules. Kinsey scheduled a meeting with her therapist to unpack the layers of guilt that had built up since childhood, always feeling she had to earn her place in the family. The therapist helped her see that her father's final choice in the will was his way of affirming her without conditions. Still, the fear of failing him lingered. By the end of the week, the lawsuit papers arrived officially. Victoria was going all in, hiring a team of high-profile attorneys. Kinsey sat at her desk staring at the documents, realizing this would test every part of her life. Aaliyah walked in and pulled her into a hug. We pay the price for living authentically, but we also reap the rewards of being true to ourselves. Kinsey held on tighter, knowing the road ahead would demand sacrifices from both of them. Kinsey stared at the lawsuit documents spread across her kitchen island, the words blurring as memories flooded back to the day she first introduced Aaliyah to her father. It was a crisp autumn afternoon at the family cabin up north. Richard had been polite but distant, shaking Aaliyah's hand with a firm grip while Victoria watched from the doorway, her smile never reaching her eyes. Later that night, after Aaliyah had gone to bed, Richard sat Kinsey down and said, "I want you happy, kid, but the world isn't always kind to choices like this. The business relies on relationships built on tradition." Kinsey had defended their love, explaining how Aaliyah made her stronger, more focused, even better at her job. He had sighed and patted her shoulder, but the seed of doubt was planted, and Victoria watered it daily with subtle comments about suitable matches and family expectations. Now, 2 months after the will reading, those old tensions exploded into open warfare. Kinsey spent hours with her legal team dissecting the family trust documents, searching for any loophole Victoria might exploit. The lead attorney, Ms. Ramirez, a sharp woman in her 40s, warned them that Victoria was painting the narrative as protecting the company from instability. In conservative Chicago circles, the idea of a lesbian heir with no biological children played into fears of the empire crumbling without a male successor. Kinsey felt the weight of that narrative pressing on her chest during a late-night strategy session. "What if they're right?" she asked quietly. "What if I can't give the company the continuity it needs?" Ms. Ramirez leaned forward, her eyes steady. "Continuity isn't about blood, it's about vision, and you've proven yours." But the words didn't fully erase the internal storm. Aaliyah noticed the change and suggested a walk along the lakefront to clear their heads. As they strolled hand in hand, Aaliyah shared her own fears. "I worry this fight will change us, make you resent the part of yourself that chose me." Kinsey stopped and turned to her, cupping her face. "Choosing you was the best decision I ever made. This is about standing up for what Dad ultimately accepted." Their kiss under the streetlights felt like a quiet rebellion against the forces trying to pull them apart. The next morning brought fresh pain when cousin Sophia called, pretending concern but really fishing for information. Kinsey hung up after Sophia suggested maybe compromising by stepping back would keep peace in the family. The betrayal cut deeper because Sophia knew their history, the summers they spent together as kids dreaming about running the company side by side. Later that day, Kinsey confronted the reality at the office when a key investor pulled out, citing concerns over leadership stability. The decision to push forward meant losing allies and facing isolation, but backing down would mean erasing her father's final act of trust. Victoria escalated by leaking stories to the press, framing herself as the grieving widow safeguarding the legacy, while Kinsey was portrayed as selfish. Aaliyah came home from the gallery one evening with tears in her eyes after a client canceled a commission due to the publicity. "I don't regret us," she said, "but the cost is real." Kinsey held her close, feeling the toll on their relationship, the late nights, the arguments over whether to hire a surrogate, just to silence critics. She rejected the idea outright. It would feel like admitting defeat and compromising their principles. The moral dilemma gnawed at her: was preserving the family business worth bending her identity? Therapy sessions became a lifeline where she unpacked years of internalized pressure, to be the perfect daughter. Her therapist pointed out that true legacy was the values her father instilled: honesty, integrity, and courage, and she was living them by fighting. Yet doubt lingered when she visited her father's grave alone, whispering questions about whether he would approve of the battle. Weeks passed with depositions looming, and Kinsey threw herself into company projects to prove her capability, finalizing a major development deal that would expand Harrington Developments into sustainable housing. The team cheered her leadership, but the victory felt hollow knowing Victoria was preparing to strike. Aaliyah supported every step, attending meetings and offering perspective from her world of creative freedom. One evening over dinner, they discussed the price they were both paying: Aaliyah's career slowdown, Kinsey's sleep loss, and the strain on their intimacy replaced by shared anxiety. Still, their bond deepened in the fire of adversity. Kinsey made the decision to go public with a statement affirming her commitment to the company and her love. The backlash was immediate, but so was support from unexpected allies in the business community. As the legal battle intensified, Kinsey realized this wasn't just about shares, it was about defining family on her own terms. The internal awakening began, slowly replacing guilt with resolve. She would not let prejudice dictate her worth or her future. The deposition room felt like a pressure cooker as Kinsey sat across from Victoria lawyers, the questions probing every aspect of her personal life. "How do you plan to ensure succession without biological children?" they asked, their tone dripping with implication. Kinsey kept her voice steady, drawing on months of preparation. Leadership isn't defined by reproduction, it's defined by results and vision. Aaliyah waited outside, offering a supportive smile when it ended, but the ordeal left Kinsey drained. That evening they argued for the first time in weeks when Aaliyah suggested exploring all legal options, including challenging the trust clause head-on. Kinsey snapped, feeling cornered. "I won't turn this into a spectacle that drags our love through the mud." The words hung heavy, and Aaliyah retreated to the studio to paint her emotions onto canvas. Kinsey regretted the outburst, recognizing how the fight was testing their foundation. The next day brought another blow when Sophia publicly sided with Victoria in a family email chain claiming concern for the company future. Kinsey read the message in her office, tears stinging her eyes. Sophia had been the one who helped her through her first heartbreak in college, the one who celebrated when Kinsey got promoted. Now money and influence had turned her into an adversary. Kinsey decided to confront her in person, driving to Sophia's suburban home unannounced. The conversation turned heated, Sophia defending her stance as practical while Kinsey accused her of selling out their shared history. "You're choosing greed over family," she said, walking away with a heavier heart. The media storm intensified, with tabloids running headlines about the lesbian heir threatening a dynasty. Aaliyah faced harassment at her gallery, opening a patron asking loudly if she planned to provide the missing heir. Aaliyah handled it with grace but later broke down in Kinsey's arms, admitting the toll on her confidence. Kinsey held her, promising they would weather it, but inside she questioned if her decision to fight was selfish. The moral conflict peaked during a weekend away at a cabin they rented to escape. Sitting by the fire, Aaliyah voiced her deepest fear. "What if winning means losing us in the process?" Kinsey reflected on her choices: the trade-off of family ties for authenticity, the cost to her mental health, the strain on their marriage. She chose to reaffirm their commitment, planning a small vow renewal just for them. Back in the city, the legal team uncovered evidence of Victoria's past manipulations, emails showing she had pressured Richard during his illness to amend the will. Kinsey faced a dilemma whether to use it in court, knowing it would destroy any remaining relationship. After sleepless nights, she decided truth mattered more than mercy. The depositions continued, with Victoria painting herself as the devoted wife while subtly attacking Kinsey's lifestyle. Kinsey's testimony focused on her accomplishments and her father's pride in her work. Aaliyah gave a statement, to her words about love and equality resonating with the court reporter. Yet the betrayal from Sophia escalated when she leaked private photos from the wedding to the press, twisting them to suggest instability. Kinsey felt the knife twist, but it fueled her resolve. Therapy helped her process the anger, turning it into determination. She made key decisions at work, restructuring teams to focus on innovation, proving her leadership amid the chaos. Aaliyah sacrificed a major exhibit opportunity to stand by her side, attending hearings and offering quiet strength. The price was evident in Aaliyah's tired eyes, but her love never wavered. Kinsey realized the awakening was happening. She was no longer the daughter seeking approval, but a woman forging her own path. The tension built as the trial date approached, with Victoria filing more motions to delay. Each step cost them time, energy, and pieces of their peace, but Kinsey saw it as necessary payment for justice. The family fractures deepened when an uncle distanced himself citing neutrality, but really fearing backlash. Kinsey mourned the losses but found solace in Aaliyah's unwavering support. Their quiet moments together became the anchor reminding her that legacy was being built daily through honesty and resilience, not through outdated expectations. Courtroom lights glared down as the trial opened with Victoria lawyers presenting their case as a defense of tradition. Kinsey sat beside Aaliyah, her heart pounding as witness after witness testified about the importance of family continuity in business. The moral weight pressed on her when an old family friend described Richard's hopes for grandchildren. Kinsey's internal voice screamed that her value wasn't tied to biology, but she stayed composed. During a recess, Aaliyah whispered encouragement, but Kinsey could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the nights spent reviewing documents taking their toll. The cross-examination turned brutal when Victoria took the stand claiming she acted out of love for the company. Kinsey watched her stepmother weave a narrative of concern masking greed. The decision to counter with evidence of Victoria manipulations came after intense debate with the team. Revealing the emails would expose past affairs and pressure on Richard, but it risked painting the family as dysfunctional. Kinsey chose transparency, the price being further isolation but the reward potential victory. Sophia testified next, her words betraying years of closeness by supporting Victoria's claims. Kinsey felt the sting but used it to fuel her own testimony. She spoke of her father's evolution, his acceptance, and his final words affirming her role. The courtroom listened as she described the real legacy values over bloodlines. Aaliyah's testimony followed, her voice steady, as she shared how their partnership strengthened Kinsey's leadership. The judge seemed moved but the battle raged on. Outside court, Kinsey faced paparazzi questions that dug into their private life. The societal prejudice hit hard when a protest group gathered outside the building waving signs about traditional family values. Aaliyah held her head high but later admitted the public scrutiny made her question their visibility. Kinsey wrestled with guilt over dragging her wife into the spotlight, the trade-off for standing firm. Nights blurred into strategy sessions where she confronted her deepest fears. What if the court sided with Victoria? What if the company suffered under her watch? Therapy sessions uncovered layers of internalized homophobia from years of subtle family comments. She emerged stronger, deciding that authenticity was non-negotiable. A key turning point came when Ms. Ramirez uncovered a prenuptial clause that could strip Victoria's shares if she challenged the will maliciously. Kinsey approved using it, knowing it would escalate the personal cost but end the fight decisively. Family dinners became battlegrounds with distant relatives pressuring her to settle. One aunt cried over lost traditions, but Kinsey stood her ground, explaining that love was the true continuity. The strain showed in small ways: missed anniversaries, arguments over trivial things, but Aaliyah and Kinsey always reconciled with deeper understanding. Kinsey made the hard decision to limit contact with toxic relatives, protecting their peace. At work, she navigated board meetings where members tested her resolve with pointed questions. She answered with data and passion, proving her capability. The awakening continued as she saw her reflection in the mirror, no longer the doubtful daughter but a leader forged in fire. Victoria grew desperate, filing last-minute motions that drained resources. Kinsey paid the price in health stress, headaches, and weight loss but refused to yield. Aaliyah paid too, canceling personal projects to be present. Their bond strengthened through shared vulnerability, conversations about future dreams beyond the courtroom. The trial entered its final phase with closing arguments looming. Kinsey prepared her statement carefully, balancing emotion with facts. The moral dilemma resolved into clarity: she was fighting not just for shares, but for every person judged by who they loved. The cost was high: fractured family, lost time, but the potential gain was freedom to lead on her terms. The final day of trial arrived with tension thick enough to cut. Victoria delivered a dramatic closing speech invoking Richard's memory and the sanctity of bloodline, her voice cracking with practiced emotion. Kinsey watched the performance, knowing the real story behind the facade. When her turn came, she stood tall, addressing the court directly. "My father chose me because he saw my strength, my vision, and my integrity. Love doesn't diminish that, it enhances it." Aaliyah's presence beside her gave her courage as she outlined years of contributions to the company. The judge listened intently, taking notes. Rebuttal followed with Ms. Ramirez exposing the inconsistencies in Victoria's claims, the emails, the pressure during illness. The courtroom buzzed as evidence mounted. Victoria's face paled when the prenup clause was highlighted, showing her challenge could cost her everything. Kinsey felt a mix of vindication and sorrow, the woman who raised her partially now facing consequences of her own choices. Deliberations began and the wait felt eternal. Kinsey and Aaliyah walked the courthouse halls hand in hand, reflecting on the journey. Aaliyah shared how the experience deepened her advocacy for equality. Kinsey admitted the fight had forced her to confront parts of herself she avoided. They spoke of the price paid, lost relatives, health scares, but also the growth gained. Hours later, the judge returned with his ruling. The will stands as written. The challenge is deemed without merit, and triggered the protective clause in the trust. Victoria Harrington forfeits her 30% shares. Gasps filled the room. Victoria stood stunned, her empire of influence crumbling. Kinsey absorbed the victory, feeling relief mixed with sadness. Outside, Aaliyah embraced her, tears flowing. "We did it." But Kinsey knew the real work was just beginning, rebuilding what remained. The media frenzy followed with headlines proclaiming justice served. Kinsey gave a brief statement thanking her team and honoring her father. Victoria left without a word, her lawyers scrambling. In the quiet aftermath, Kinsey visited the company headquarters alone, walking the halls her father built. The weight of leadership felt different now, earned through trial. She called Aaliyah to share the moment, realizing their love had been the constant. The family fractures remain, some relatives reaching out tentatively, others cutting ties permanently. Sophia sent a short apology, but Kinsey chose distance, the betrayal too deep. Aaliyah's career rebounded with new opportunities inspired by their story. Kinsey implemented changes at the company, focusing on inclusive policies. The internal awakening complete, she no longer questioned her place. Yet the costs lingered, sleepless nights, strained friendships, the public gaze that lingered. They celebrated quietly at home with a simple dinner, toasting to resilience. Kinsey reflected on every decision, the confrontations, the doubts, the stands taken. Each had its price, but each built something stronger. Kinsey sat in the now empty courtroom, holding Aaliyah's hand as the reality sank in. Victoria had lost everything, her shares transferred due to the malicious challenge clause the judge found in the trust documents. The family empire was hers, but at what cost? Lost relationships, months of stress, the public scrutiny that tested their marriage. But she had awakened to her own strength, and the true meaning of legacy, one built on love and authenticity, not blood alone. The weeks following the verdict brought a whirlwind of transitions. Kinsey assumed full control of Harrington Developments, implementing the sustainable projects her father had dreamed of but never fully pursued. Board members who once doubted her now offered support, seeing the stock rise under her leadership. Yet the personal landscape remained scarred. Victoria moved out of the family mansion, issuing no apology, only a bitter statement to the press about broken traditions. Kinsey tried one last outreach, a letter expressing hope for healing, but received silence in return. The decision to let go brought closure, but also grief for the mother figure lost to prejudice. Sophia attempted reconciliation over coffee, admitting her greed blinded her. Kinsey listened but set boundaries, the trust broken beyond easy repair. Aaliyah thrived, launching an exhibit inspired by their journey, themes of resilience and chosen family. Their relationship emerged stronger, forged in the fire with deeper communication and appreciation. They took a short trip to the cabin where it all began, walking the same trails, talking about expanding their life, perhaps through adoption or mentorship programs, to build legacy differently. Kinsey reflected on the internal battles, the nights of doubt, the moments she nearly compromised her truth. Each choice carried weight, the confrontation with Victoria, the stand against Sophia, the refusal to hide their love. The prices paid were real emotional scars, professional isolation, family voids, but the rewards outweighed them in clarity and purpose. At the company, she mentored young women facing similar prejudices, sharing her story openly. The awakening brought confidence, she led with empathy and vision, honoring her father while carving her path. Quiet evenings at home became sacred, Aaliyah painting while Kinsey reviewed plans, their presence enough to heal the day's wounds. The social prejudice lingered in subtle ways, invitations that excluded them, whispers at events, but they faced it united. Kinsey understood now that true victory wasn't the shares, it was the freedom to live without apology. As she stood on the balcony of their apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline, Aaliyah joined her, wrapping arms around her waist. "We built something real," she said. Kinsey nodded, the weight lifting fully. The battle had changed them all, revealing strengths and flaws. Victoria, greed and prejudice cost her more than money, it cost her family. Kinsey paid with tears and trials but gained herself. In the end, the judgment brought justice but also a reminder of fragility. She turned to Aaliyah, ready for whatever came next. When someone uses prejudice and greed to tear apart family bonds, does the final judgment bring true justice, or does it reveal how much we all sacrifice in the name of legacy?